I can't remember the date, but it would have been back around 1991 or 92, or somewhere way back there. The first idea was, it basically started from like a creative urge within the company. We had this creature shop in London, and we were doing mostly movies out of that group, and they were doing some really cool creature effects and stuff like that were for movies. The most ambitious we had gotten for television was Dinosaurs, the TV series, which was very ambitious, sitcom, and they were animatronic characters and stuff. But we wanted something that mixed everything that we could do in creatures in one very cool, more adult series. And that's kind of where we started. And from there, it sort of was like, well, what if you did something that was like Star Wars Bar? I think I remember that being sort of thrown around. Something that had just a little bit of everything. You know, every corner you turned around was some new and weird effect. That's where we started. We thought we really wanted to move into science fiction, which was kind of new for us. I'd say Dark Crystal and Labyrinth were definitely fantasy. So we wanted to do something that was cool science fiction that had a lot of creatures in it, that went a lot further than other science fiction.
Boy, was Spielberg ever wrong. Close Encounters, my ass.
Rockne O'Bannon, we talked to several people, and then we really liked Rockne. And with Rockne, we started talking about taking an Earthling and putting him into the series, because he had done a few science fiction creations, and his feeling was, and we all got it immediately, was if you're doing all this work to create a cool, very out there alien reality, what you want is you want a point of view, a star point of view, that sees it as alien and weird and way out there, and not one that's just perfectly comfortable there, because it's kind of weird to just drop into drama where everybody's creatures and aliens and nobody's treating each other like it's weird. So that was the idea of creating John Crichton and as an Earth astronaut and getting him into this other galaxy, or other end of this galaxy. We're still not sure what it is. So that he could go into scenes and go,
"What is the matter with you people?"
And that also gave some creative license to Ben to start doing that, where he kept doing modern science fiction references and monster movie references, and it started to inform his character too. So the whole show sort of kind of spun off of that.
How come I'm not afraid?
Fear accompanies the possibility of death. Calm shepherds its certainty.
I love hanging with you, man.
We initially wrote one script ourselves with Rockne. And then Rockne brought in David Kemper, and we wrote another, I think it was 4 scripts, but it might have been another 5 scripts. So there was either 4 total or 6 total scripts. And we did that for Fox. Fox paid for that. And the idea was that we were going to go on Fox, and this is, again, years before we went on air. And Fox at that time decided to pick up a different show. There was a changeover of, the same old story that you hear 1,000 times. Executives changed. This executive is going away. They liked Farscape. This new executive is coming in who liked, I think it was Space and Beyond. I can't remember which series it was. So they eventually didn't do it. So now we had these scripts, and we were, at the time, we just kept designing. We just said to the Creature Shop, just keep designing. So we did so much design work over the years. You can find models of Moya that looks completely different from what Moya looked like. Zan was Zen and was a man in blue. Scorpius was Krace's sidekick. He was an evil Krace's sidekick, and he was this insect-like pup, and he was animatronic. It wasn't what Scorpius is at all. All sorts of things were evolving during that time. And Rigel and Pilot were probably the most intensive design for the characters. So we now had this incredible package of art and these 6 scripts. And David went off to do stuff, Rockne went off to do stuff, and then we just kept sort of selling it, trying and selling it. We decided we were going to try and just syndicate it, just go straight to sell it directly to the TV channels and see if we could raise the money that way. And in starting that process, the Sci-Fi Channel had just made a decision to start commissioning original programming, and up until then they'd only, bought science fiction movies that had already been out for a long time, and they put it on their channel. So we were one of the first series that they bought. They saw this was going out to syndication and basically called us and said, "Whoa! Rather than putting it out to syndication, why don't you let us pay for it and make it with us?" And that's basically the way the whole thing went. But the result is now it's 2004, and we've made 4 seasons. We've just made a mini series that encapsulates the story of season 5. But we've been working on it for it's probably 12 years now. A lot of us.
Give me one reason I shouldn't fire your ass and shut down the whole Farscape project.
Sir, the project could still bring great benefits to this organization.
To me, a really good idea always stays a really good idea. And one thing you have to be very careful of in this industry is, letting a broadcaster or a studio pay for your script, and then because they've paid a little bit of money, they then decide not to make it, and then they decide nobody can make it. And you have to be very careful of that. I'd say half of our productions have been things that were passed on, and then a few years later we actually got them set up. But Farscape was always a great idea, and it was very flexible. And I think we all knew right at the beginning that it was science fiction like you'd never seen it before. It was already a fresh enough take because we decided we wanted it to be real macho, and at the same time we wanted it to be over the top, which would allow it to be funny. When we create the personalities of characters, they tend to be so extreme that they'll feed comedy even when it's not comedic, even when it's Farscape is drama. There's there's a few episodes where they actually are deliberately funny, but not often. And usually where there's comedy, it's just because of the situations that these very extreme characters are forced together and create a funny moment, like funny moments are created in real life all the time, but not as deliberate comedy. And we knew that Farscape was more primal, it was more emotional. We were taking an opposite position from Star Trek. Star Trek took a sophisticated vision of the future. We are not the future in Farscape. We're just alien. And in Star Trek, everybody has control of their emotions. People are much more considered. People plan ahead. They're very fast. They're ahead of you. They speak with few words. Their lines are short. In Farscape, we said everybody's over-emotional. It's almost like they're all without culture because they've all been mixed up and they're going from planet to planet, and everybody's actually quite insecure and their emotions are dialed right up, and everything is very unpredictable. And even within the stories of Farscape, once a story looks like it's predictably going that way, we would force it to go that way, so that it was always, very surprising. And we wanted a visual look too that was cool in science fiction, but also kind of tribal and primal. So you'll see a lot of tattooing, and you'll see leather and beads and stuff like that, and earrings, and you'll see a lot of sort of cool tribal elements that are going into also these very cool modern futuristic spaceships and stuff like that. So we knew we had a good formula, and we just kept sticking with it.
Dargo, there are people watching.
Why don't you just get dressed and give him a good show, sweetheart?
I am dressed.
These days, it's hard to make a big series. We knew it was going to be big and expensive. So even at the beginning, when we were initially developing with Fox in America, and at that point, it was Fox and BBC in Britain, and at that point, we were going to shoot in Britain, and BBC were going to be paying more money for it because it would be British as well as American, and we would indeed be shooting in Britain. Then what happened was, when we were moving from Fox, we knew that Fox were going to spend a lot more money than cable does. So when we knew we were moving to syndication or the Sci-Fi Channel, we needed a different creative way to finance this. We thought, boy, this is such a big show that we need to not only get the cable channels in America, Sci-Fi, to pay more than anybody's ever paid on cable for a TV series. Not only do we need that, we need 2 other countries to also say it's their show and pay for it like it was their show. So we were trying to do a British Australian co-production with the first sale to Sci-Fi, and purely as a way to raise enough money that each of those broadcasting groups would be paying more. And as we started to investigate, that was as we were starting to investigate shooting in Australia, and Australia was just starting to do some pretty cool stuff, and they were actually shooting Matrix when we were down there scouting and setting up Farscape, and you started to see there was a real coming of age of the Australian industry at that point. They were very excited about science fiction. It was much bigger than, it's still by far the biggest TV series ever shot in Australia, Farscape is. What they lacked in experience, they more than made up for in enthusiasm. Because they were so enthusiastic and they didn't know how to do this stuff. They didn't know what's the way you do a fight scene using gymnastics, what's the way to shoot with somebody in prosthetic makeup and how to schedule it, what's the way to shoot in front of green screens and process shooting and spaceships and stuff like that. They had to make up a new way for every one of those scenarios. So because they didn't have the experience, the result was a show that has every bit as much production polish. It is as beautifully finished as any science fiction television ever made. And yet the choices in how to do things were unique and new. And so it's why it became science fiction like you've never seen it before, the most innovative series. I mean, we have walls and walls of awards that we've won for how innovative the series is. And a lot of the reason for that is because these Australian craftspeople were making up ways of solving problems rather than solving them the way they'd been done before, because they didn't actually know the way they'd been done before, which is terrific.
Listen to me. And listen very, very carefully.
What the hell did you just say?
Frankly, it's just expensive to make the kind of things that we make. And they're not successful, really, unless they're successful in more than one country. It's hard for the American broadcasters sometimes because it's very hard for them when you say, we need these elements because Australia really likes this part of the show and would like to see more of it, or England really likes this part of the show and would like to see more of it. It's very hard for an American broadcaster because they're used to nobody else, no other broadcasters have any input into how a show is made other than the American broadcaster. So it's tough for the broadcasters to have to work that way. But having said that, Sci-Fi were terrific, and they were pretty specific on what they wanted more of. And as long as everybody was talking that way, it made for a very exciting, very complex series. The show doesn't simplify because there were lots of elements that Australia loved and wanted to see more of, and there was elements that England loved and wanted to see more of, and there was elements that America loved and wanted to see more of. So in a lot of ways, producing for the international market is in a lot of ways creatively liberating because you are trying to please a lot of different broadcasters. And although that's tough, it actually creates freedom. It means that every broadcaster will blame you every time something's not successful or an episode, they'll say it's because you did something that we didn't ask you to do. But having said that, I love working with the international market, particularly England and America has been a combination that we've done a lot of. And bringing in Australia is kind of fun because Australia, they're like mavericks. They're out there wild people who are also very educated, very smart. They're just an interesting, exciting culture. So it was a real nice influence to bring that in to the sort of American, Australian, the American English mix. But it's liberating and logistically tough. Creatively liberating, logistically tough.
Hi. My name's John. John.
Ben was cast here in America. You know what? It was a normal, like, network-like casting process that only happens in California. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, where you video test a lot of actors, and you have to have 5-year deals with them before they even do a video test. So it's tough. It's very tough. You bring people in, and they've got to sign a contract that says, if you say you want me to, I'll move to Australia for 5 years. That's pretty hard. We couldn't bring American cast over. It was always only going to be John Crichton and possibly a few smaller roles, like it turned out to be John's dad was also American, but he wasn't on the show all the time. There was a lot of great actors that were coming in, and we were casting at the same time as other series, or no, we were probably casting a little bit past when we weren't quite casting at the same time as what they call the pilot frenzy casting season that happens every year in America. Sci-Fi Channel was on a slightly different schedule, so we were a little protected from that. But we saw a lot of American actors, and Ben just shined to us. It was Rod Perth, who was at Sci-Fi, who was he had come from a network background, so he was making sure we didn't do it in a shortcut way that many of the cable channels work, and he wanted the full, thorough, we're looking at everyone, I want a video test, I want the 5-year contract. So it was, it was a big deal casting Ben. And what Ben had was, there was a friendliness to him, there was a charm to him, and there was something else going on all the time behind his eyes. And not many people appear to be that straightforward, and at the same time that you're thinking, what a straightforward guy, you're thinking, and there's something else going on in his head. And it was just it was really interesting, because even when he isn't playing subtext, he's playing subtext, and even when he says a line straight on, and he's right on plot and right on emotions, there's still always a twinkle in his eye. There's a something that Ben Browder always does that says, I'm actually thinking something else as well while I'm asking you this question. And you might think I'm asking you this question for this reason, but I got another reason too. And I might be saying to you that I'm not attracted to you at all, but I'm thinking I really am very attracted to you. So it worked everywhere. It worked romantically, it worked dramatically, and we knew we wanted at that time. There was a little bit of Indiana Jones as kind of a direction that character should go in. Somebody who is taking charge and making the plan and committing to it, and at the same time saying to everybody, I'm making it up as I go. I don't know what I'm doing, but you're all too crazy, so I say we do this, so we're doing it. And then it goes wrong, and it keeps going wrong. And, I think Ben will laugh. I'll tell you, I never gave him a plan that would work. I think we gave him 2 plans that would work in 88 episodes.
No, I will not come with you.
You've been irreversibly contaminated, remember?
It means death.
It is my duty, my breeding. Since birth, it's what I am.
You can be more.
Initially, the show was meant to be British-Australian. And then in the end, it was an Australian show. We shot in Australia, and it was an Australian show. So the cast was, Ben was the only American, and everybody else was Australian. But initially, it was meant to be British-Australian, which meant 2 roles had to come from Britain, I think. And as we started, we hadn't yet even started up the British casting process, but we knew that in Australia there was only certain roles. We were pretty sure that Aaron was going to come out of Britain. And then what happened was Australia started saying, well, let us show you some Australians playing Aaron anyway, even though we know you'll probably go with British. Because at the time, we could have taken an English Aaron but used a British zone. We could have mixed it up in different ways. So what was odd was they were bringing in these girls to test, and And we had given them an archetype that was like coldly beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed, Aryan. This was sort of the direction we were sort of drawing the Nazi parallel with the Peacekeepers, and we had in our minds, athletic gymnastics, a good fighter actress, who would be doing flips and stuff possibly. We had all these sort of ideas. So anyway, they got Claudia to come in and read opposite some actresses because Claudia was a friend of the casting director. And so they brought in Claudia to read opposite. Now, Claudia was a well-known actress in Australia at that point. She was quite well-known. And she was shooting Pitch Black and stuff like that. So we were watching these auditions on videotape, and we were all going, well, can we see more of the actress that's actually reading to the ones who are auditioning? Because even though she's just standing there holding the script, reading lines, she was pretty great. And then she was doing Aaron opposite some people who were auditioning for other roles. And she did one audition, and we thought, wow, this is really something. And then we decided, at about the same time, we found out we're not going to be casting in Britain. So Ben had just been cast, and we said to Ben, come on down to Australia, have a look, because he had to move there and stuff. So we were saying, come on down, as soon as he was cast, come on down, look at Sydney. And we said, maybe have a look at some of the casting choices. So he went into a room with Claudia, and the two of them started working together, and it was so clearly going to work brilliantly that's the way Claudia ended up cast as Erin, and everybody felt, wow, she's going to be just a star in this role. And she was kind of an opposite type. I mean, we had blonde, Aryan, blue-eyed, and what Claudia is sort of strong and Claudia kills you with her dialogue. She doesn't need to lift a hand.
What's up, Dargo?
I'll tell you what's up. I'm gonna kill you.
I don't think so.
What is Farscape was more answerable by the show than by anybody involved in the creating team. And it started taking on its own artificial intelligence almost. That's really exciting. And when that artificial intelligence is correct, where things that were written in the script were not done on set. Instead, somebody was uncomfortable with this line, so made it this line, and somebody was uncomfortable with that bit of blocking, so made it that. Different people. And the props guy said, I know the script said this prop, but I thought maybe this prop. And these decisions are right and better. Then that's when the show starts to know itself and create itself more than the creators are creating, or not maybe more, but as much as the creating team are creating the show. When that happens, it's a really exciting thing. And that clearly started happening, again, about 2/3 of the way through season 1. And that's real exciting. When I was literally waiting with excitement for the first cut of a script, because I'd seen the script and I know the cut's going to be something different and better, and I might have given a few thoughts but not many, and it just would keep growing and growing. And then when you see the finished cut, then you'd wait for the visual effects and for the finished music, and you'd know it would grow again in a way that you didn't expect. It's really exciting. It's like a child growing up or something. Farscape was going to walk.
Oh, hell, we're screwed. Should I disrobe so it's memorable?
The truth is, sometimes it got out of hand on Farscape. Sometimes everybody felt like there was too much pressure to create. Definitely. There's been times when I've been on set and anybody will say, everybody starts doing everything. And that can be a problem, when everybody is suggesting changing this line. The prop guy, the lighting director, the scenic artist, everybody. And everybody is suggesting, why don't we do the scene this way? And then people start thinking, it's my responsibility. It's or actors start thinking, I have to manage all of my props and all of my costumes because that's the kind of show this is. We're all creatively responsible for everything. It started to at times it would become nuts. You can imagine. At times it's like chaos. You walk on set, it's chaos. You think, how are we ever going to shoot? Nobody's in agreement here. Everybody's got final say about everything. Having said that, it would often become fights. There were people would argue. It was like Farscape behind the cameras was often similar to Farscape in front of the cameras.
Oh, salmonella, what the hell is that?
That's crow dog, a delicacy, even for pagans.
Yeah, how long was it under your butt getting delicate?
Everybody loves each other. Everybody gets along terrific. But like any family, they're all at each other often. And everybody's trying to reinvent everybody else. Constantly. It's a big old circle of reinventing.
How you doing?
I have to pee. I thought I would live much longer.
I never thought I'd live this long.
The truth is, every time the show continued, I was jubilant and never confident. When we went from season 1 and got the order for season 2, Sci-Fi Channel was spending a lot of money for a cable channel. And the fact that they loved it so much that they were quite willing to pay far more than they could ever make from the show. And they always did. And I know people were kind of hard on Sci-Fi. Sci-Fi always paid more than they could ever make selling ads during the airing of Farscape. Their feeling was that it was a real good show. They were proud of it. It kind of represented sci-fi. And even though they would never be able to recoup what they were spending on Farscape while it was airing, it would help to identify the channel and help to just grow the channel overall. So every year, it was never a guarantee. It was such a big show for a cable channel that I was always so impressed that they were able to come back and order another season.
You and your timing.
The fact that we stopped after season 4 was a surprise and happened at a particularly tough time because after season 3, what we tried to do was do season 4 and 5 as one package. And that was a slightly more complicated way of working. It meant committing to people for 2 seasons, 2 years of work, committing to camera companies and lighting companies and all that stuff. And the idea was it would make the episodes a little less expensive of the now it will be 44 episodes that we were making rather than 22. And Sci-Fi, like any channel, would say, okay, let's do this because this is smart, but if we're concerned about how expensive, we need to be able to stop making them halfway through. Of course, it's enormously complicated. It's like a train moving at full speed and then putting the brakes on. You always said, I guess we can do it if we have to, but it's a really hard thing to do. And it all happened at a bad time. It was while we were shooting the last episode, Sci-Fi was basically saying, we can't make season 5. So now we were trying to trigger some emergency plan that meant people who thought they were working for 2 years were now finding out, no, it's only going to be 1 year. And it was a tough process. I could understand why Sci-Fi did it though, because they had a lot of what they were realizing was with such a big show, it's got to be somewhere else first. That's what they had found out. They had Stargate on, and Stargate, I don't think is as good a show. They're real nice people, I'm sure. And they're making a good show. I just don't think it's as good as Farscape. But it showed you what would happen if you take a show that starts on a bigger channel and then move it to the small channel, that your ratings are better. So we had that working against us, that Stargate was outperforming Farscape on the Sci-Fi Channel. So we had that working against us. So I could understand how it happened. There was a lot of people changing over. At the Henson Company, we had sold the company The family had sold the company to EMTV. They were unsure of the investment they were putting in, but they were contractually bound. So it was one of those where Sci-Fi would say, we can't afford it. Maybe we'll do a half season. They wanted to do a half season. Well, now the international investors, EMTV, were going, oh, we don't have to do a whole season? Well, we're not sure we're not contractually obligated to do a half season. It was one of these where it was a house of cards, a financing house of cards that I was trying to hold together that kept tripping, it kept falling over here, and it was falling over here. And I'd go on set, and the cast and the creative they'd be saying, are we on or are we off? And I'd say, looks like we're really on for season 5. So I'm sorry I scared everybody. I think we're on. And then 2 days later, it'd be, I think we're off. I can't believe it, but I think we're off. And then 2 days later, I think we're on. And 2 days later, I think all those people were so emotionally beat up by the end. I felt awful. And it was me trying to put together this financing house of cards that did turn out to be a collapsing house of cards. And it was tough because it was happening while people were shooting the last episode of season 4. And actors were finishing and saying, well, am I going home forever or am I going home for a month's vacation? And leaving and thinking they were going home for a month's vacation and then finding out they were going home forever. So it was really tough, And at the last moment, we had a wrap party that became a wrap party for the series instead of a wrap party for the season. And we had an episode that finished with a cliffhanger. And should we try to rework it so there's not a cliffhanger? No, we decided in the end. We decided, you know what, this is the way Farscape ended. It ended with a weird to be continued, so we're going to end the last episode with to be continued. The broadcasters were not very happy about that. Broadcasters thought we put that to be continued as sort of a way of poking at them, maybe, which it wasn't. It was just that was real. The story wasn't done.
We have some unfinished business.
Yes, we have.
The Save Farscape guys basically made it possible for us to make the miniseries, the Peacekeeper Wars, because the fact that they didn't give up is the only reason why there's still more Farscape right now. They lobbied everybody. They did email campaigns to the Sci-Fi Channel trying to get them to pick it up. But the Sci-Fi Channel people feel like they were inundated with the fans of Farscape, angry at them, and then friendly, please bring it back, and then angry, then please bring it back. But I'll tell you, it was several other channels out there as well, There were lots of channels that got inundated with please buy Farscape from Sci-Fi and please put it on your channel. They did an enormous amount of work. They bought ads in magazines saying bring Farscape back. They bought space in TV Guide. And when the last episodes were going on, they were buying publicity to help support, hoping that if there were some real good ratings just at the end, that maybe Sci-Fi would change their mind. Of course, it's not quite that simple. But what did happen was they put the word out in so many different directions and gave it so much momentum that I was introduced to a consortium of financiers that I never would have met without them, never would have found them. And they never would have found me, probably, if it weren't for the fact that they basically... What ended up happening was the financiers of the miniseries are not normally television financiers, and they saw this underground sort of thing going on with Farscape, bring it back, and then they became acquainted with the series, and then they were saying, we'd quite like to talk to you about helping to continue this thing. And that was just amazing, and it took a little while to pull that whole deal together. But if it hadn't been for the Save Farscape movement, Farscape we would have stopped at the end of season 4. And we would have stopped in a not very nice place, because the fact that there were so many stories unfinished, this was one problem that we had when doing the miniseries. We knew we had to start where the series finished, which is a little tough for a broadcaster to say you're going to air a big event miniseries that starts not at the beginning of a story, but it starts partway through. So we were trying to do a little bit of both. Peacekeeper Wars is partly its own self-contained story and partly the continuation of and conclusion of the big series story. But we wanted to go make movies, for instance, and we even had a couple of approaches after season 4 to do a theatrical movie. And we didn't know quite how to do it because we had left the series too up in the air. You know, we knew that we needed to get some of these stories settled so that, you know, at the end of, so that Farscape was continuing but not with cliffhanger, unfinished questions all over the place. So now, by having done Peacekeeper Wars, now Farscape can spin off. There can be spin-off series. There can be movies now, which none of that was really an option before.
Thank you.
What I'm most proud of with Farscape is how innovative it is. It really turns everything on its head. I think we, as a company, the Jim Henson Company, we've always been proud of the fact that we don't try to emulate other shows. We try to be innovative every time we make anything. But I'd say since Dark Crystal, Farscape is the most innovative thing we've ever done. Dark Crystal was insane, I think, probably. My father was insane when he first decided he was going to make Dark Crystal, and nobody, you know, believed that that movie could really ever happen. But Farscape, similar, we took science fiction and turned it on its ears. We took the genre, which it never really, science fiction isn't a genre, but everybody liked to believe it was a genre, so they like to assign all these rules to the genre, and when it isn't even a genre and it shouldn't have any rules. But we broke all those rules, you know. And you know, what's exciting to me is that we did something so cool and different, and yet it's not art housey. It's still, you know, often if you do something really cool and new, it's too confusing and it's too weird. And yet what Farscape does is it's incredibly commercial at the same time that it's very, very innovative. Some of the storylines are very commercial storylines, you know, with Crichton being very predictable and the all-American hero in there. But then, you know, he stumbles in interesting ways and stuff like that. But the show can be very innovative and yet very watchable and very embraceable at the same time. I'm proud of how creative it is, as much as anything. I feel like all the characters are parts of my family as well now. I feel related to everybody in a weird way. And that's just weird, actually. You don't want to even get inside the psychology of that, but you really do. You come out of it feeling like they're your brothers and sisters and they're your family. And you're not sure whether you're thinking the characters or the actors. You know, so it all gets confusing. It's a very strange industry. No wonder we're all sick.